and welcome back to another episode of Off the Beaten Path. In today's video, we're traveling to Cincinnati, Ohio to visit Brass Lasagna. Chris Novy started creating these unique percussion instruments in 2020, and through word of mouth and social media, his instruments can now be seen in drum shops across the country and played by musicians all over the world. Chris's creativity and adaptability is on full display with each one of the instruments he's created, and it was a treat for me to get to learn more about his inspiration and process. Before we get too far into the video, I want to remind you that I'm creating new episodes in this series each month, so make sure to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all of my upcoming video releases. So without any further ado, let's take a look inside Brass Lasagna. Hey Chris, how's it going?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me out today.
Yeah, well, welcome. Yeah, this is really cool that you dropped by.
So this is the headquarters, workspace, and the start of Brass Lasagna.
It's, you can say down and dirty and maybe a little more dirty, but
yeah. Well, yeah, I love it. It's like a mad scientist lab. There's like fragments of recycled cymbals everywhere. And I know that you've talked about wanting to use every last little piece and you don't throw many things away.
No, when you harvest a whale, you use every scrap of it.
Yeah.
So I use every scrap of every cymbal, no matter what shape, size, condition. So there's a sound in everything. There's no bad sound. It's how you use the sound. Like someone will hit a cymbal and like, that's not for them, and someone else will hit it and they'll love it, So in anything that I make, it's gonna make someone happy, I think, at some point.
I wanna just get a brief background on how you got started in music and how that love of music has kind of brought you into crafting instruments.
Yeah, I started like playing drums in school band, typical playing in 5th grade at 10 years old. The spark for that was going to a Thursday night rehearsal with my dad to pick up my sister at the marching band rehearsal out on the field. And the marching band just like comes up right in front. The drummers are playing their cadence, marching the band off the field. And they park right in front of my dad and I, and they're just like cooking. The bass drums are thumping, snare drummers are just wailing. And I just look at my dad and I said, I want to do that, And he just kind of rolls his eyes, They took me up on it. My mom bought me a snare. So I ended up at Kent State. There's a great ethnomusicology program there, and there's an African drum ensemble. 2 really amazing professors, Halim El-Dab and Kazadi. I've never, been one to just like go to the store and look for something. It's just always, why not just make it, just figure out how to make the sound that's in your head or just mess around with something. So, I had an old cymbal and I made the first ribbon crasher and I used it on gigs for probably 2 or 3 years, and I was in a band, and it just started ending up in songs. And actually the name, I guess I needed to tell you where the name came from. So we're in a rehearsal, and my good buddy Ben Franks, he's just like, we're working on a tune, and he said, hey man, give me some more of that Brass Lasagna. And there was the name. So, and it didn't hit right away, but because I really didn't start making stuff as a thing, but probably for another 2 years. But when I started to, that just was the obvious name for what I was doing. All of a sudden, people just started getting in touch. And the next thing I know, I'm making them in all different shapes and sizes. And they started to, like, people would refer back to that third one you made that's got this sort of sound. And can you make one like that? And I said, well, I can try, And so the ones I made in the past became sort of my catalog, and like the place where people would go for the sounds that they liked, or the one that's like that, but can it be a little trashier? Can it be a little brighter? And I would just start working with the materials and starting to, understand what the thickness is of the material, the shape and the sizes, and if I was hammering it or not. Yeah, it just evolves. It just continually evolves.
So even right here on the workbench, there's a few different instruments you've come up with. So can you share a couple of those?
This is the base of a ribbon crasher, and I've been working out layers. This will soon be a nice ribbon crasher. This is made from original. It's just like a cymbal blank, so it's raw bronze, really kind of heavy. Well, the sound you get out of raw bronze in a ribbon crasher is a really, really bright, really cutting, kind of chirpy, beautiful sound. I think the next thing I started into was making shakers. A customer, now friend in Portland, was into shakers, and I said, man, I bet I could make one. So then I started to try different shapes, like ones that are like typical, like a round shape or like a gonza or like shaker you can buy. And then I started experimenting with like hammering bells into different shapes. And some are like, I call this a torta, turtle shape, torta, and the sandwich, you know. They have this really bright, chimey sound that people really seem to like. So I've been making quite a lot of those. I think maybe the next thing I started making was bells and just experimenting with hammering cymbals into just different bell shapes. This is like a cha-cha sized bell. Didn't really mean for it to come out that way, but that's just what it is. And this is for a customer friend in Indianapolis. It's going to be on her kit eventually. Got a little bit more to do. This is kind of like something quite new. This is for a customer that wanted to be able to change out the filling. So I put a threaded insert in it so you could unscrew it and just add whatever you want. And he was really into getting the right sound, the right weight. So when you're shaking it, it has the right feel. And when he uses shakers, they're at a very specific tempo. So it's got to feel right, just at the right tempo. So to be able to manipulate what you're putting inside was really important to him. So hence the design of being able to get in and out of it when what he wanted.
So it seems to me like a lot of the tooling and machinery you'd use to do this work is like a bandsaw or a Dremel, and then hammering, tools to bend and shape.
I mean, at first I was just using tin snips, and on some cymbals you can get away with that, but some cymbals are really thick. So I just started thinking about how to make a bandsaw, and a typical bandsaw is made for wood and it's way too fast. So I came up with a way to slow down the bandsaw. I did like a pulley system, like just a speed reduction. And this is the second one. This is the first one over here. It's this crazy ancient bandsaw from 1937. That was the first iteration. It's a little wobbly, but I did an enormous amount of work on that thing. Depending on the blade that you get, you can really do some really tight radius cuts on these things to do all the weird shapes. To be able to cut stuff like this.
Yeah.
You know, you could do that with a die grinder, but it would take so much time. The next kind of rabbit hole I went down, like realizing, what is this hammering thing? Like, we're like, oh, people are hammering on cymbals. Why are they doing that? You know, to change the shape, to change the tension, to change the hardness and the sound. There's a local blacksmith school in town, so I took an intro class just to kind of like figure out what this whole thing was about and getting the feel for hammers and things. And I sort of went from there. And this was my first anvil. It's just a 2-inch piece of steel, scrap steel. I've got this anvil, and the horn is really useful for getting inside. And then for like hammering out on larger sheets, I found this company. It's a father-son metalworking company. I think they're in Alabama. And I just gave them a spec and had a radiused piece of hardened steel, and they threaded some holes into it. And it's just this hardened piece of steel about 1.5 inches thick, 8 inches square.
When you talk about using every part of a cymbal for something, even some of the way these anvils and pieces are fastened on or held in place is by fragments of cymbals.
Yeah.
That's a great testament to your commitment for not wasting any part of a cymbal.
It's material. What would I do? I'd go to the hardware store and have to buy something I could make. So I might as well just make it.
I know that's not an instrument, but I think it really speaks to your whole mentality here.
This just came in to the shop within the last 2 weeks. I found this. A slip roller is what it's called. And it allows you to run metal through it and put a curve on it. I hope to turn this into either like a mounted tambourine or just like some cool little shallow snare drum at some point. But this was done on this machine, and you can dial it in to just the right dimension that you want. So that was a total score. I really have been getting into like the hammering aspect of it, just like what you can do just with hammering. It's just really fun. What really allows you to do it is to kind of have different hammers that allow you to kind of get inside the material. This was a custom-made hammer from Downing Arts. This is a really good guy. He made this one as well, this big dog head hammer. And this is for really just like moving a lot of material really quickly. This is for getting inside things, for just working a lot of these really crazy tight spaces. This came from France. It's like the French military, and it's probably my favorite hammer. It's It's really cool. It does a lot of work.
Yeah.
And everything in between, like this is like a Boilermaker hammer that also has a really good point for just like moving metal in a really quick way. Working copper and bronze, they call it brownsmithing. And little did I know, but there's a whole school of people that working copper is a whole different thing. They'll turn flat sheets of copper into some of the most beautiful, amazing shapes.
Well, I know a lot of the bigger, dirtier, bulkier work happens out here, but you also do a fair amount of work in the basement as well, along with recording some of the demos and making samples so that people can hear what these instruments sound like.
Yeah, this is where all the bulk work happens, and then the assembly kind of happens in the house. So I've been doing a lot of soldering just with a typical propane torch, but everything you see here, these have all been brazed together with silver solder, and the result is quite amazing. It's really cool. The shakers are brighter. Not to say that any of the ones that I've made, this is typical tin solder. It has its own sound. I've made several of them that people love it for that particular sound, but when you braze it, you're actually fusing the metal together, so it becomes even harder and more resonant. So you get that.
Oh, yeah, and you can really, by your touch, augment the sound.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. And so, yeah, this kind of is one thing that I've sort of landed on that people really, really dig. This is a cannoli shaker. It's kind of a typical, like, Brazilian ganza sort of sound. And this is like a little mini burrito. A big burrito with handles so you can get a hold of it. And then this is kind of a cool thing. I just call this a straight side shaker, or that I've made like much smaller versions of it. My good buddy Matt Seimer here in town, Handshake Drums, he said, let me paint some of these things. So he took a couple of my shakers, and it's just cool. And it's big, chunky. And it's all kinds of eye candy, so.
Yeah. That's a nice way to kind of collaborate with what is a very rich community here in Cincinnati of percussionists and percussion makers.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us. And as far as like you were talking before about like working directly with a customer, and it's someone, a customer in Arizona. I've made him several things. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, he just drops a message saying, hey, I want to make I think he called it an ocean drum. And it's typically a two-headed drum that's very shallow that you put beads inside and you swirl it around. And he said, I'd like you to make one out of metal and make it 5 inches around. So this is for him. I did one side that has a bit of a radius to it that's hammered, and the other side is pretty flat. And each side has its own sound. And then the other side is just louder.
Wow.
And then you can kind of work that. And this was just completely out of a conversation of like, hey man, can you do this? And
well,
I said,
the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think I could.
It worked out.
This is one of my benches where I just kind of do the refined work where I put together hoop crashers like this, fit them all, you get the hardware together. This is a little mini 10-inch one that I made, drill the holes, put the chains on them, make sure that the fit's right, make sure they kind of have enough wiggle and dance to get the tones to pop out. That kind of thing. I'll just take a cymbal and stamp a bunch of my logo into it, and then I'll make all the caps that'll go on the shakers once I fill them. And then over here, this is kind of the everything. Again, it comes from customers. Like a customer got in touch, they wanted a wood block inside a bell. Some folks really dig those, so I'm going to probably do more of those. This is the first ribbon crasher. This is the original brass lasagna here. As raw as it gets, really. I think it was like an old, really super thin hi-hat cymbal. The bracket that I had was a Ludwig floor tom leg. The wood was the rail off of my children's cribs. that was no longer in use that we were going to get rid of. So it was decent wood. It's maple. And I don't dare change it because it works and it sounds good. You know, when I finish something, I like to just do a quick demo. So it's nothing fancy. I just kind of set up my iPhone and turn on my spotlight and just play a little something. Let whatever it is kind of do the talking. Everything you see around here is just instruments that I've made for people with purpose. Others have just been like, didn't go quite as well. Like this bell, for one. This was going to be a bell block. I had a wood block fitting in here, and I just didn't make the bell big enough. So I ended up just using the same wood block and creating a much bigger bell. This is what I've come to call it trance bell, and the trance bell name came from just when I started like making them and playing them. You just tune into it, and it starts like sending you off in directions, and you end up, you know, what you're going to do for just like sit down for 30 seconds ends up that you're playing for 10 minutes, and you're just having a ball with it. But this came about when a customer wanted a bell that had a very specific thing. He wanted to hit it once at 104 beats a minute and have sizzlers in it, that the sizzlers would die out over that 4 count. And I tried making a bell, it didn't quite get there, and then I had this, which I was turning into a shaker, and I hit it, and it had the right resonance. And he liked the idea, but it just wasn't the right sound he was going for. But I started to turn this into a thing I called trance bells, and I've made 10-inch ones, 12-inch, 14, 16, 20, and 24-inch. People have sent me other cymbals that they've had in their life that had a crack in it, and I've turned it into a custom trance bell for them. And that came from working on another completely different project, and now it's like a regular part of the instruments I make. So
yeah, it's one of your kind of core offerings.
Yeah, I've lost track of how many I've made. It's really cool. A friend in New York sent me a cymbal that had a crack in it, just like a split around the outside. He said, "Can you do something with that?" So I hammered it into this little, like, this tongue or this wiggly tentacle thing. And it was a 13-inch cymbal, and I sent it back to him, and he loved it. I added a couple rivets to it. So this is like the second generation. I made one for myself just because, and it's turned into this creation over here, putting a couple of them together, going for different tones. So each one of these surfaces has a different pitch to it. You find a way to use the sound that it makes, you know, and that's how I ended up using it. People started asking for like ways to get a sizzle sound out of cymbals without drilling holes. So actually the first pass at that was spoon jingles, is what I call them. Just sections of cymbals that I've hammered into shapes. They're big, they have a lot of weight, and they're out towards the edge of the cymbal. They almost have like a muting effect. Some people really found that useful. They could work with that. But other people wanted a really much lighter sound. Like, yeah, that's really cool, but can you do something lighter? So then I came up with this, and I call them finger jingles. This started it, and this is where it ended up, and there's probably going to be other iterations of that too.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for spending the time today and bringing us into your world. If people want to follow your work or reach out to you about purchasing an instrument or working together on creating a sound, what's the best way to stay in touch?
Probably like the most direct way right now is just to find me on Instagram. That's brasslasagna. And you can just direct message me. Or if you'd like, you could just send an email. That's another simple way. Just brasslasagna, all one word, @gmail. And I'll get it. I'll get the message, and we can start a conversation and figure out what you want.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come and check all this out. I appreciate it.
Of course.